All right, today we are diving into a safety topic that is just so critical, but honestly, it's dangerously misunderstood. We're talking about confined spaces. Now, these aren't just tight spots, they are incredibly complex environments that OSHA regulates for a really grim reason. Mistakes here are just uniquely deadly. And it's a challenge OSHA tackles with very specific standards, whether you're in general industry or construction. So let's get right into it. And that is not hyperbole. Not at all. OSHA's own data shows that the fatality rates for confined space entry are just completely out of proportion. And what's even more heartbreaking is how often these incidents involve multiple victims. You see it time and again. An untrained coworker rushes in to help, only to fall victim to the exact same invisible hazard. So that begs the question, right? What is it that makes these spaces so incredibly lethal? Well, it's usually not what you'd think, like a mechanical failure or something collapsing. No, the real killer, the one that gets you silently and with terrifying speed, is something you can't see, you can't smell, and you definitely can't taste. It's the very air that you're breathing. And that leads us perfectly into our first section. We are going to look at the number one killer in confined spaces, the hazard that OSHA's rules put right at the top of the list, above everything else. And here it is. When you analyze these incidents, the story is always the same. The immediate cause of death, more often than not, isn't a fall, it's not getting caught in machinery, it's the atmosphere. We're talking about air that either doesn't have enough oxygen, is filled with toxic fumes, or is so rich with flammable gas that it's just waiting for a spark. If that atmosphere gets to a point that OSHA calls immediately dangerous to life or health, or IDLH, then any other mistake, any little slip-up becomes instantly fatal. Okay, let's really get into this next part, because you simply cannot control a hazard if you can't even identify the space correctly in the first place. OSHA has a very specific three-part legal test for what makes something a confined space. And believe me, getting this right is the absolute first step in this entire safety process. And listen, all three of these have to be true. It's not a pick and choose list. First, it's got to be big enough for a person to actually get their body inside and do some work. Second, there has to be a limited or restricted way to get in or out. So think about the manhole on top of a tank, or a small hatch on a silo, maybe the entrance to an underground vault. And third, it's just not designed for a person to hang out in there all day. It is a temporary workspace, period. Now, this is a super important distinction that you have to get right. Not all confined spaces are created equal. A space can check all three of those boxes and just be a confined space. But the rules get way stricter when it becomes what OSHA calls a permit-required confined space, or a PRCS. The difference is simple. A PRCS is a confined space that also has, or could have, at least one serious hazard inside that could kill you or cause serious harm. So what kicks a space into that next level? Well, OSHA gives us 4 specific triggers that automatically make a space permit required. First, and we've talked about this, a hazardous atmosphere. That's the big one. Second, engulfment potential. This is the risk of being basically swallowed up by a liquid or some kind of fine, flowable solid like grain or sand. Third is a trapping configuration, meaning the internal shape of the space could wedge or trap a person. And fourth is this really important catch-all, any other recognized serious hazard, which could be anything from exposed machine parts to live electrical wires. Okay, so once a space is identified as permit required, you can't just send someone in. You have to follow a very strict procedure. This next section is all about what I like to call the official safety playbook that OSHA requires for every single entry. And the heart and soul of that playbook is the entry permit. Honestly, the best way to think about this isn't as a piece of paperwork, it's a safety contract. It's a legal document that proves you've evaluated all the hazards, you've put all the right control measures in place, and, in OSHA's words, you've officially established acceptable entry conditions before anyone takes a single step inside. Now, a huge part of that permit is atmospheric testing, and it has to be done in this exact order. There is no other way. You have to test for oxygen first. Why? Well, it's not just because you need it to live, it's because the sensors on your gas monitor that detect combustible and toxic gases, they need a normal level of oxygen to even work correctly. If you test out of order, you could get a reading that says everything's fine when it is absolutely not, and that's a fatal mistake. And beyond testing the air, that permit also verifies that all the physical hazards are under control. This means a few key things. You've got hazard isolation, which might mean blinding a pipe, and that's literally sliding a solid steel plate into a pipe to physically block anything from flowing through. Then there's energy control, which is your classic lockout/tagout procedure to make sure no machinery can start up. And finally, atmospheric control, which is actively using fans to ventilate the space, pushing the bad air out and pulling fresh air in. So, the playbook is all set. But a perfect plan means nothing without a trained, coordinated team to actually pull it off. And that brings us to the people. OSHA legally defines 3 distinct roles for every single permit-required entry, and each one of these roles has critical jobs that simply cannot be ignored. First up, you've got the authorized entrant. This is the person who's actually going into the space. They have to be trained to know exactly what hazards they're facing, they need to stay in constant communication with the person outside, and they need to know how to get themselves out if conditions start to go south. Next up is the attendant, and this person is without a doubt the entrant's lifeline. They stay outside the space at all times. Their job is to continuously watch the entrant and monitor the conditions inside. They are the dedicated eyes and ears, ready to call for help and even perform a non-entry rescue, like using a winch and a harness to pull the entrant out. And this quote right here, this says it all about how serious this role is. It's pulled directly from the OSHA standard for a reason. The law makes it crystal clear. The attendant does nothing else. They don't go grab tools. They don't help with another task nearby. Their only job is the safety of the person inside. And here's why that's so absolute. So many tragic incident reports show the same pattern. The attendant steps away for just a second, and in that moment, the entrant is overcome by an invisible gas. Without that constant watch, no one even knows there's a problem until it's far, far too late. That singular focus is the most critical link in the entire survival chain. And finally, we have the entry supervisor. Think of this person as the one with the ultimate authority over the whole operation. They are responsible for verifying that every single safety check has been done, that every control is in place, and that the whole team is ready to go. They are the ones who sign the permit to authorize the entry, and they have the absolute power to terminate the job and cancel that permit the second conditions are no longer safe. So as we start to bring this all together, let's just zoom out for a second. We've gone over definitions, hazards, procedures, and the people involved. But the real lesson from OSHA's rules is that none of these things work on their own. True safety isn't just one thing. It's a completely integrated system. It's the engineering controls that isolate the hazards, combined with the procedures that are documented on the permit, all executed by a well-trained team where every single person knows their role inside and out. If any one part of that system fails, the whole safety net just collapses. And that really leaves us with one final thought. The OSHA standards, they give us the checklist, right? These are the non-negotiable rules for survival. But real safety, the kind that actually ensures everyone gets to go home at the end of the shift, that goes so much deeper. So is it just about checking boxes on a form? Or is it about building a culture where every single person truly understands the stakes and feels empowered to protect themselves and their team? That's the real question.